Marcus Williams pushed his mop bucket down the empty hallway of Hartwell Corporate Tower, the wheels squeaking against the polished marble floor. It was nearly midnight, and the building was quiet except for the hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic 40 floors below. His back ached from the long day, but he couldn't complain. This job paid the bills and kept food on the table for his 8-year-old daughter, Emma. He paused outside the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Emma was sleeping peacefully in their small apartment, hopefully having finished her homework before bed. Mrs. Rodriguez from next door was watching her again, refusing to take payment despite Marcus's insistence. "We help each other," she always said with a warm smile. That's what neighbors do. Marcus had been working as a night custodian for 3 years now, ever since his wife Sarah passed away from cancer. The medical bills had drained their savings, and he'd had to sell their house and move into a tiny 2-bedroom apartment across town. Emma had been just 5 then, barely understanding why Mommy wasn't coming home anymore. Now she was 8, smart as a whip, and the light of his life. The elevator dinged, and Marcus looked up, surprised. It was unusual for anyone to be in the building this late. A woman in an expensive suit stepped out, her heels clicking against the floor. She looked stressed, carrying a briefcase and checking her phone constantly. Marcus recognized her from the employee directory photos in the lobby. Victoria Hartwell, the CEO's daughter and head of the legal department. "Excuse me," she called out as she walked past. "Are you the custodian?" "Yes, ma'am." "Marcus Williams. Is there something I can help you with?" Victoria stopped and turned to face him. Up close, Marcus could see the exhaustion in her eyes. "I'm sorry to bother you so late. I left some important documents in my office, and I need them for an early morning meeting. Would it be possible for you to let me in?" "Of course, Miss Hartwell. I have the master keys." Marcus secured his cleaning cart and walked with her toward the executive offices. "Working pretty late tonight, aren't you?" Victoria sighed. "Big case tomorrow. Actually, it's today now, isn't it? Sometimes I lose track of time when I'm preparing for court." She glanced at Marcus curiously. "You're here every night, right? Don't you have family waiting at home?" "I do. My daughter Emma, she's 8. Marcus's face lit up when he mentioned her. "She's probably dreaming about becoming a scientist or maybe a teacher. Changes her mind every week about what she wants to be when she grows up. That's sweet. My father always said I'd be a lawyer from the time I could talk." "Guess he was right." Victoria's expression softened. It must be hard working nights with a young daughter. Marcus unlocked her office door and held it open for her. "We make it work. Emma's a good kid. She understands that Daddy has to work to take care of her, and honestly, this job has been a blessing. Your father's company treats its employees well, even us night shift folks." Victoria gathered her documents from her desk, but she seemed hesitant to leave. "Can I ask you something, Marcus? Do you ever feel like the system is stacked against people like you, working multiple jobs just to get by, while others have everything handed to them?" The question caught Marcus off guard. He leaned against the doorframe, considering his answer carefully. "I won't lie, Miss Hartwell. Sometimes it feels that way. When Emma needs new shoes and I'm choosing between that and groceries, or when she asks why we can't live in a house with a yard like her friends do. But I try not to think about what's fair or unfair. I just focus on what I can control, working hard, being there for my daughter, and teaching her that good things come to those who don't give up." Victoria nodded slowly, something shifting in her expression. "Your daughter is lucky to have you." "I'm the lucky one," Marcus replied. "She gives me a reason to keep going every day." As they walked back toward the elevator, Victoria seemed lost in thought. "The case I'm working on tomorrow, it's about a custody dispute. A father fighting to keep his daughter." She paused. "He reminds me a bit of you, actually. Working multiple jobs, doing everything he can to provide for his child." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "That's tough. I can't imagine anything worse than someone trying to take Emma away from me." The mother left when the girl was 3. Abandoned them completely. Now she's back, married to a wealthy man and claiming the father is unfit because he works nights and can't provide the same lifestyle she can. Victoria's voice carried a note of frustration. She has expensive lawyers, a big house, all the advantages money can buy. "But money can't buy love," Marcus said quietly. "That little girl knows who was there for her when she needed someone most." Victoria stopped walking and looked at him intently. "You really believe that?" "I know it. Emma and I, we don't have much, but we have each other. No amount of money can replace that bond. A parent's love isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in bedtime stories, bandaged knees, and showing up every single day. No matter how tired you are. The elevator arrived and they stepped inside together. As the floors counted down, Victoria seemed to be wrestling with something internally. When they reached the ground floor, she turned to Marcus one more time. "Thank you for letting me into my office. And thank you for the conversation. It's been enlightening." She extended her hand for a handshake. "I hope things work out well for you and Emma." Marcus shook her hand, noting the firm grip and the sincerity in her eyes. "Thank you, Miss Hartwell. And good luck with your case tomorrow. That father is fortunate to have you fighting for him." As Victoria walked toward the parking garage, Marcus returned to his cleaning cart. Something about their conversation stuck with him. He'd seen genuine concern in her eyes when she talked about the custody case, and he hoped she would fight hard for that father and daughter. Every child deserved to stay with the parent who truly loved them. He continued his rounds, thinking about Emma sleeping safely at home. Tomorrow was Saturday, which meant they could spend the whole day together. Maybe they'd go to the park or work on the puzzle they'd started last weekend. Simple pleasures, but they were theirs, and that made them precious. Little did Marcus know that his words that night would soon echo in a courtroom, and that his own life was about to intersect with the very case Victoria Hartwell was preparing to argue. Marcus woke up to the smell of burnt toast and the sound of Emma humming in the kitchen. He glanced at the clock, 8:30 a.m. After working until 6 a.m., he'd managed only 2 hours of sleep, but Emma's cheerful voice was better than any alarm clock. He pulled on his robe and padded to the kitchen, where he found his daughter standing on a chair attempting to scrape black crumbs off a piece of bread. "Morning, sweetheart. What's all this?" Emma beamed at him, her gap-toothed smile lighting up the small kitchen. "I wanted to make you breakfast, but the toaster is being mean." She held up the charred bread with a frown. "It doesn't look like the picture on the cereal box." Marcus chuckled and lifted her down from the chair. "How about we make breakfast together? Teamwork always makes things better." They worked side by side, Marcus guiding Emma through making scrambled eggs while she told him about her dreams from the night before, something involving flying elephants in a castle made of ice cream. Their peaceful Saturday morning was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. Marcus frowned. Mrs. Rodriguez usually called before coming over, and they weren't expecting anyone else. He peered through the peephole and saw a woman in a business suit holding official-looking papers, flanked by a man in a uniform. "Emma, honey, why don't you go brush your teeth while I answer the door?" The woman introduced herself as Janet Morrison from Child Protective Services. The uniformed man was a court officer. Marcus's blood ran cold as she handed him the papers. "Mr. Williams, I'm sorry to inform you that a complaint has been filed regarding the welfare of your daughter, Emma Williams. You're required to appear in family court this Monday at 9 a.m. Marcus's hand shook as he read the document. Someone was claiming he was an unfit parent because he worked nights and left Emma alone. The complaint also mentioned their substandard living conditions and his inability to provide proper supervision. His mind raced. Who would do this? Emma was never alone. Mrs. Rodriguez watched her every night, and during the day she was either at school or with him. "I don't understand," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Emma is well cared for. She's never alone. She's doing great in school. She's happy and healthy. Who filed this complaint?" Janet Morrison's expression was sympathetic but professional. "I can't share that information right now, Mr. Williams. However, I am required to do a preliminary assessment of Emma's living situation today." She glanced around the small but tidy apartment. "May I speak with Emma?" Emma appeared in the doorway, her face curious but cautious. She moved closer to her father, sensing the tension in the room. Marcus put a protective arm around her shoulders. "It's okay, sweetheart. This lady just wants to ask you some questions." The next hour felt like an eternity. Janet spoke gently with Emma, asking about her routine, her school, how she felt when her father was at work. Emma answered honestly. Yes, Mrs. Rodriguez stayed with her at night. Yes, Daddy made sure she did her homework. No, she never felt scared or alone. She showed Janet her room, proudly displaying her drawings on the wall and the bookshelf Marcus had built from secondhand wood. After Janet and the court officer left, promising to submit their report before Monday's hearing, Marcus sat heavily on the couch. Emma climbed into his lap, wrapping her small arms around his neck. "Daddy, are they going to take me away?" Her voice was small and frightened. Marcus held her tight, fighting back tears. "No, baby. No one is going to take you away from me. I promise." But even as he said the words, fear clawed at his chest. What if the judge didn't see what Janet Morrison had seen? A loving father doing his best. What if all they saw was a night shift custodian living in a tiny apartment? That evening, Mrs. Rodriguez knocked softly on their door. Word had spread quickly through their tight-knit building community. She brought homemade soup and a fierce determination to help. "Mijo, whoever did this doesn't know what they're talking about. That little girl is loved and anyone with eyes can see it." "But what if that's not enough?" Marcus asked, pacing the small living room while Emma played quietly with her dolls, pretending she wasn't listening to every word. "What if the judge thinks she'd be better off somewhere else? What if they think I'm not good enough because I clean offices instead of working in one?" Mrs. Rodriguez gripped his shoulders firmly. "You listen to me, Marcus Williams. You are a good father, the best. You work yourself to the bone for that child. You read to her every night when you get home. You never miss a parent-teacher conference even when you're dead tired. Don't you dare let anyone make you feel ashamed of honest work." That Sunday, Marcus barely slept. He spent hours researching family law online, trying to understand what he was facing. The deeper he dug, the more worried he became. The system seemed stacked against single parents, especially those without means. He read horror stories of children removed from loving homes due to poverty or unconventional work schedules. Emma found him at the kitchen table at 3 a.m., surrounded by printed articles and legal documents. She was clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit, the one Sarah had given her before she died. "Daddy, you look sad." Marcus pulled her onto his lap. "I'm just worried, sweetheart. But you know what? No matter what happens, I love you more than all the stars in the sky, and that love is going to protect us." "Mommy used to say that," Emma whispered. "That love is the strongest thing in the whole world." "Your mommy was right." Marcus kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "And she's watching over us right now, making sure everything works out okay." Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching Marcus's mood perfectly. He dressed Emma in her best dress, the blue one with tiny flowers that Sarah had bought for her 6th birthday. It was getting a bit short now, but it was still her favorite. Marcus wore his only suit, purchased years ago for Sarah's funeral and now slightly tight across the shoulders. They took the bus to the courthouse, Emma clutching his hand tightly. The building was intimidating, all marble columns and stern-faced security guards. Marcus felt completely out of place among the lawyers in expensive suits hurrying past with their briefcases. "It's like a castle," Emma whispered, looking up at the high ceilings. "Yeah, but remember what we talked about. Sometimes the most important battles happen in castles, and we're going to win this one because we have something more powerful than anything else. We have each other." As they found their way to the family court waiting area, Marcus spotted a familiar face across the room. Victoria Hartwell sat with an older man at a conference table, reviewing documents. She looked up and their eyes met for a brief moment. Recognition flickered across her features, followed by what looked like surprise and concern. Marcus wondered if this was the custody case she had mentioned that night in the office building. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, facing the same nightmare scenario she had described to him just days earlier. But he pushed those thoughts aside. Right now, all that mattered was fighting for Emma. The bailiff called their case number. Marcus squeezed Emma's hand and stood up, his legs feeling unsteady. This was it. Everything he held dear hung in the balance of whatever happened in that courtroom over the next few hours. He thought of Sarah, of Mrs. Rodriguez's fierce support, of every bedtime story and scraped knee he'd tended to. This was more than a legal battle. It was a fight for his family, for his right to be Emma's father. As they walked toward the courtroom doors, Marcus whispered a silent prayer. He was about to discover just how much the system valued love over money, and whether a custodian's devotion could stand up to whatever forces were arrayed against him. The courtroom felt impossibly large as Marcus and Emma entered, their footsteps echoing on the polished wood floors. Emma stayed close to his side, her small hand gripping his tightly as they took their seats at a table near the front. Marcus's throat went dry when he saw who was sitting across the aisle. A woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and expensive jewelry sat next to two lawyers in tailored suits. She kept glancing over at Emma with an expression that Marcus couldn't quite read. Was it longing or calculation? Next to her sat a distinguished-looking man in his 50s, clearly wealthy based on his custom suit and gold watch. "Is that my birth mother?" Emma whispered, and Marcus's heart broke a little at the confusion in her voice. "Yes, sweetheart. But remember what we talked about. Just because someone gave birth to you doesn't make them your real parent. The person who stays, who loves you every day, who takes care of you when you're sick, that's your real parent." Marcus looked around frantically for his court-appointed attorney. A harried-looking young man in an ill-fitting suit rushed in at the last moment, dropping papers as he approached their table. "Mr. Williams, I'm David Chen, your attorney. Sorry I'm late. Had another case running over. I reviewed your file this morning, and I have to be honest, this is going to be challenging." Marcus's heart sank. This kid looked like he'd just graduated law school, and he was up against what appeared to be a team of expensive attorneys. "What exactly are we facing?" David shuffled through his papers. "Your ex-partner, Linda Morrison, is claiming you're an unfit parent. She's remarried to Richard Morrison. He's a successful businessman, owns several restaurants in the city. They're arguing that they can provide Emma with better educational opportunities, a stable home environment, and proper supervision." "But I provide all of those things," Marcus protested. "Emma's doing great in school. She's never been neglected or unsupervised, and our home might be small, but it's filled with love." "I know, and we'll argue that. But they have resources we don't. Character witnesses, expert testimony about child development, documentation of their financial stability, and large home. We have—" David looked through his thin file again. "We have your neighbor's statement and Emma's school records." Before Marcus could respond, the bailiff called for everyone to rise as Judge Patricia Stevens entered. She was a stern-looking woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Marcus had read online that she had a reputation for being tough but fair, though some said she favored stability and financial security in custody decisions. Linda Morrison's lead attorney, a polished woman named Catherine Blake, stood to present their case. Her voice was smooth and confident as she painted a picture of Marcus as a well-meaning but inadequate parent. She spoke of Emma's unstable living situation, the inappropriate night shift work that left the child in the care of neighbors, and the limited opportunities available in their current environment. "Your Honor," Catherine continued, "my client deeply regrets the mistakes of her youth that led to her temporary absence from Emma's life. She was barely 18 when Emma was born, struggling with her own issues, and she made the difficult decision to step away until she could provide the stability every child deserves. Now married to Mr. Morrison and with their family established, they can offer Emma what every child should have: 2 parents, a stable home, private education, and unlimited opportunities." Marcus watched the judge's face, trying to read her expression. When Catherine began presenting photos of the Morrisons' large suburban home, complete with Emma's potential bedroom decorated in pink and purple, he felt his hopes slipping away. How could he compete with that? Then it was David's turn. He stood nervously, consulting his notes frequently as he spoke about Marcus's dedication as a father, his perfect attendance at parent-teacher conferences despite his exhausting schedule, and Emma's academic success and emotional well-being under his care. But Marcus could see it wasn't enough. The presentation felt weak compared to the polished case the other side had made. "Your Honor," David concluded lamely, "while Mr. Williams may not have the financial resources of the petitioners, he has provided Emma with something money can't buy: unconditional love and unwavering commitment." Judge Stevens called for a brief recess, and Marcus felt panic rising in his chest. This was going exactly as badly as he'd feared. Emma tugged on his sleeve, her eyes wide with concern. "Daddy, why does that lady want me to live with her? I don't even know her." Marcus knelt down to Emma's eye level, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Sometimes, sweetheart, grown-ups make decisions they think are best even when they might not understand what's really best. But I want you to know, no matter what happens in here today, you are loved, you are wanted, and I will never, ever stop fighting for you." When court resumed, Judge Stevens called Emma forward. "Emma, honey, I'd like to ask you some questions. Is that okay?" Emma looked back at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly, then walked to the witness stand. She looked impossibly small in the large chair, her legs barely touching the floor. The judge's expression softened slightly as she leaned forward. "Emma, can you tell me about your life at home with your father?" Emma's voice was clear and strong. Daddy works really hard to take care of me. He reads to me every night when he comes home from work, even when he's really tired. He helps me with my homework, and he makes funny voices when we read stories together. Mrs. Rodriguez watches me at night, but Daddy always tucks me in when he gets home. He makes pancakes shaped like animals on Sunday mornings, and he never forgets to put notes in my lunchbox. And how do you feel about the possibility of living with Mrs. Morrison? Emma looked confused. I don't know her. She wasn't there when I was scared during thunderstorms, or when I lost my first tooth, or when I cried because I missed Mommy. Daddy was there for all of that. Why would I want to live with someone who doesn't know that I'm afraid of the dark, but love butterflies? A murmur went through the courtroom. Marcus saw several people in the gallery nodding, and even Judge Stevens seemed moved by Emma's simple honesty. Catherine Blake stood for cross-examination, but her usual confidence seemed shaken. Emma, wouldn't you like to have your own big bedroom and maybe a swimming pool and go to a really good private school? Emma thought about this seriously. Those things sound nice, but I already have everything I need. I have Daddy, and Mrs. Rodriguez makes the best cookies, and my teacher says I'm one of the smartest kids in class. My bedroom might be small, but Daddy painted stars on the ceiling so I wouldn't be scared at night. You can't buy that kind of thing. Marcus felt tears pricking his eyes. His little girl understood more about what truly mattered than most adults ever would. But Linda Morrison wasn't finished. She requested permission to address the court directly, and Judge Stevens allowed it. Linda stood, her voice trembling with what sounded like genuine emotion. Your Honor, I know I made mistakes. I was young and scared, and I thought Emma would be better off without me. But I've grown up now. I've learned what it means to be a mother through my stepchildren, and I want the chance to give Emma everything I couldn't before. I want to make up for lost time. The courtroom fell silent. Marcus felt the weight of those words, the pull they might have on the judge. Linda sounded sincere, remorseful, and determined to do better. But Marcus knew something she apparently didn't understand. Parenthood wasn't something you could step in and out of when it was convenient. Then, to everyone's surprise, Marcus stood up. David grabbed his arm, whispering urgently that he should sit down, but Marcus gently shook him off. Your Honor, may I speak? Judge Stevens looked surprised but nodded. Mr. Williams, you may address the court. Marcus walked to the front of the courtroom, his heart pounding but his voice growing stronger with each word. Your Honor, I don't have a big house or a swimming pool. I can't afford private schools or fancy vacations. I work nights cleaning offices because that's what I need to do to provide for my daughter. But I want to tell you what I do have. Marcus stood in the center of the courtroom, every eye fixed on him. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice grew stronger as he continued. I have memories of every single day of Emma's life since she was 3 years old. I know that she has nightmares about storms, but loves the sound of rain when she's awake. I know she puts ketchup on everything except ice cream, and that she talks to her stuffed rabbit like it's her best friend because it was the last gift from her mother. The courtroom was completely silent. Even Linda Morrison's expensive lawyers had stopped shuffling their papers. Marcus looked directly at the judge, then turned to include the entire room in his words. I know that Emma is left-handed but tries to use her right hand sometimes because she thinks it makes her writing look prettier. I know she wants to be a veterinarian this week, but last week she wanted to be an astronaut, and the week before that, a teacher like Mrs. Patterson at her school. I know these things because I've been there every single day, not because someone told me or because I read it in a report. Marcus's voice began to crack with emotion, but he pressed on. When Emma had pneumonia last winter, I sat by her hospital bed for 3 straight days. I missed work and we struggled to pay rent that month, but I wouldn't have been anywhere else. When she took her first steps after her mother died, I was there. When she said her first word after months of barely speaking from grief, I was there. When she lost her first tooth and was scared because it bled, I was there. He turned to look at Linda Morrison directly, his voice growing firmer. Ms. Morrison, you gave birth to Emma, and I respect that. But giving birth doesn't make someone a parent any more than buying a house makes someone a homeowner if they never live in it. You chose to leave when things got difficult. I chose to stay when my world fell apart. Judge Stevens leaned forward, clearly moved by Marcus's words, but she maintained her professional composure. Mr. Williams, while your dedication is admirable, the court must consider what's in Emma's best interest going forward. Can you provide her with the same opportunities that the Morrisons are offering? Marcus nodded, having expected this question. Your Honor, I may not be able to give Emma a big house or expensive things, but I can give her something much more valuable. I can give her the security of knowing that the person who loves her will never abandon her again. I can teach her that worth isn't measured by what you own, but by how you treat others and how hard you're willing to work for the people you care about. He gestured toward Emma, who was watching him with wide, trusting eyes. Emma is already thriving. She's in the top of her class academically. She has friends, she's confident and kind and funny. She knows she's loved unconditionally. Why would we disrupt that stability for the promise of material advantages? Marcus paused, collecting his thoughts for what he knew might be his final argument. Your Honor, I understand that money can buy opportunities, but love creates possibilities. Every night when I come home from work, exhausted and covered in cleaning chemicals, Emma runs to the door to hug me. She doesn't see a janitor. She sees her daddy who works hard to take care of her. She's learning that honest work has dignity. That family means showing up even when it's difficult, and that love isn't something you can walk away from and come back to when it's convenient. The silence in the courtroom was profound. Marcus looked at the judge, then at Emma, then at the people in the gallery who had been watching this drama unfold. I'm not asking this court to choose between rich and poor. I'm asking you to choose between someone who left when things got tough and someone who stayed when things got impossible. Marcus returned to his seat, his legs shaky from adrenaline. David patted his shoulder, whispering, "That was incredible. I've never heard anything like that in a courtroom." But their moment of hope was short-lived. Catherine Blake rose for her rebuttal, her voice smooth and professional once again. Your Honor, while Mr. Williams' emotional appeal is touching, we must focus on facts, not feelings. The fact is that Emma would have significantly better educational opportunities with the Morrisons. She would have access to private tutoring, music lessons, travel, and experiences that will expand her worldview. Mr. Williams works night shifts and sleeps during the day when Emma is home from school. How much quality time are they really spending together? Marcus felt his heart sink as Catherine continued to methodically dismantle his argument with cold logic. She presented charts showing the academic advantages of private education, statistics about children from single-parent households, and expert testimony about the importance of two-parent families. Furthermore, Catherine said, producing a folder of photographs, our investigation has revealed that Mr. Williams' building has several code violations, including inadequate heating and a broken security system. Emma's bedroom window faces an alley where there has been criminal activity. Is this truly the environment where a child should be raised when a safe, nurturing alternative is available? Marcus closed his eyes, feeling defeated. Everything Catherine said was technically true. Their building was old and had problems. The neighborhood wasn't perfect. He couldn't provide Emma with private tutors or music lessons or trips to Europe. Judge Stevens called for another recess to review the evidence and testimony. As people filed out of the courtroom, Marcus sat with his head in his hands. Emma climbed into his lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. Daddy, did I say the right things? Are they going to let me stay with you? Marcus hugged her tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. You said perfect things, sweetheart. You told the truth, and that's always right. Whatever happens now, I want you to remember that you are loved more than you could ever imagine. During the recess, something unexpected happened. Victoria Hartwell approached their table, her expression serious but kind. Marcus recognized her immediately from their encounter at the office building, and his heart raced. Was she here to testify against him as a company executive? Mr. Williams, Victoria said quietly, I've been listening to your case, and I want you to know that I think you're an extraordinary father. Marcus looked at her in confusion. I don't understand. Are you here as a witness for Ms. Morrison? Victoria shook her head. I'm not here in any official capacity today, but I was here for another case, and I couldn't help but hear your testimony. The things you said about love creating possibilities, about showing up even when things are difficult. Those words have been haunting me. She glanced around to make sure they weren't overheard, then continued. I want you to know that what you said to me that night in the office building, about a parent's love not being measured in dollars, that changed something in me. I've been thinking about it ever since. Marcus was speechless. He had no idea that their brief conversation had made such an impact on this powerful woman. Victoria looked at Emma, who was coloring quietly in a book David had given her to keep her occupied. She's beautiful and clearly well-loved. Anyone can see that. She paused, seeming to wrestle with a decision. "Mr. Williams, would you mind if I made a phone call? There might be someone who should hear about this case." Before Marcus could ask what she meant, the bailiff announced that court was back in session. As they filed back into the courtroom, Marcus noticed Victoria speaking urgently into her phone in the hallway. He wondered what she was doing, but he had bigger concerns as Judge Stevens prepared to render her decision. "This court has heard compelling arguments from both sides," Judge Stevens began, her voice measured and serious. "The welfare of the child must always be the primary consideration in these matters. After reviewing all testimony and evidence, I find myself facing a decision that will profoundly impact this young girl's future." Marcus gripped Emma's hand, his heart pounding so hard he was sure everyone in the courtroom could hear it. This was it. In the next few moments, he would either remain Emma's father or become just another person she used to know. Judge Stevens continued, her voice carrying the weight of years on the bench. "While the court recognizes the material advantages that the petitioners can provide, I must consider the totality of circumstances affecting this child's well-being." She looked directly at Emma, then at Marcus. "The bond between this father and daughter is evident and profound. Emma is thriving academically and emotionally in her current environment." Marcus held his breath, afraid to hope. "However," the judge continued, and Marcus's heart plummeted, "the court is also concerned about the living conditions and the inherent challenges of Mr. Williams' work schedule. Therefore, I am ordering a 6-month supervised transition period, during which Emma will spend weekends with the Morrisons while remaining primarily with Mr. Williams. During this time, both households will be monitored and we will reassess the situation." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Marcus felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. It wasn't the worst outcome, Emma would still live with him, but it wasn't the victory he'd prayed for either. Emma looked confused and frightened, not understanding what the judge's words meant for her future. Linda Morrison was clearly disappointed, whispering urgently to her lawyers about appeals and modifications. Catherine Blake was already shuffling papers, no doubt planning their next legal strategy. But then something extraordinary happened. The courtroom doors opened, and a distinguished man in an expensive suit walked in, followed by 2 other people in business attire. Marcus recognized him immediately. It was Robert Hartwell, the CEO of the company where Marcus worked. Victoria quickly approached her father, speaking to him in hushed, urgent tones. Judge Stevens looked up, clearly annoyed by the interruption. "This court is in session. Unless you have business before this court, please take your conversation outside." Robert Hartwell stepped forward respectfully. "Your Honor, I apologize for the interruption, but I believe I have information relevant to this case. My name is Robert Hartwell, and I'm the CEO of Hartwell Corporation. Mr. Marcus Williams has been an employee of mine for 3 years. Judge Stevens frowned, clearly not pleased with this unexpected development. "Mr. Hartwell, while I appreciate your concern for your employee, character references should have been submitted through proper legal channels before today's hearing." "Your Honor," Robert continued, his voice respectful but firm, "I'm not here merely to provide a character reference. I'm here to address some of the concerns raised about Mr. Williams's ability to provide for his daughter's future." He gestured to the people who had entered with him. "This is Janet Thompson, our Director of Human Resources, and Michael Chen, our Director of Corporate Development." Marcus watched in stunned silence, having no idea what was happening or why his boss was suddenly in his custody hearing. Emma squeezed his hand, whispering, "Daddy, who is that man?" Victoria stood and addressed the court. "Your Honor, if I may, I'd like to request permission for my father to speak. What he has to say directly addresses the court's concerns about Emma's future opportunities and living situation." Judge Stevens looked at both legal teams. Catherine Blake was clearly frustrated by this unexpected turn, while David Chen looked as confused as Marcus felt. After a moment's consideration, the judge nodded. "I'll allow it, but please be brief, Mr. Hartwell." Robert Hartwell stood tall and confident, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to boardrooms and high-stakes decisions. "Your Honor, last night my daughter told me about this case and about a conversation she had with Mr. Williams. She described a man who works tirelessly to provide for his daughter, who finds dignity in honest work and who understands that love and commitment are more valuable than material possessions." He turned to look at Marcus directly. "Your Honor, I've reviewed Mr. Williams's employment record. In 3 years, he has never missed a day of work. He arrives early, stays late when needed, and takes pride in everything he does. Our night security reports that he often finishes his assigned areas quickly and then helps other custodial staff complete their work. This is a man who leads by example. Marcus felt tears welling up in his eyes. He had no idea that anyone in management even knew his name, let alone paid attention to his work. Robert continued, but more importantly, I've learned something about Mr. Williams that goes beyond his work ethic. When my daughter was working late in the office last week, she encountered Mr. Williams and had a conversation that profoundly affected her. He spoke about the importance of showing up for the people you love, about measuring success not by what you own, but by how you treat others. He paused, letting his words sink in. Your Honor, these are not the words of an unfit parent. These are the words of a man who understands what it truly means to be a father. Janet Thompson stepped forward with a folder. Your Honor, Mr. Hartwell has authorized me to present an offer that addresses the court's concerns about Emma's future opportunities. She handed documents to both legal teams and the judge. Effective immediately, Marcus Williams is being promoted to our facilities management team with a substantial salary increase and daytime hours. This position includes full medical and dental benefits as well as an education fund that will cover Emma's college tuition when the time comes. The courtroom buzzed with surprised murmurs. Marcus stared at the papers David was showing him, hardly able to believe what he was reading. It was a promotion to a supervisory position with a salary more than double what he'd been making as a night custodian. But Robert Hartwell wasn't finished. Additionally, Your Honor, Hartwell Corporation has a scholarship program for employees' children. Emma would be eligible for private tutoring, music lessons, and educational enrichment programs through our partnership with local institutions. We're also prepared to provide assistance with finding suitable housing in a better neighborhood, with the company co-signing a lease if necessary. Catherine Blake jumped to her feet, clearly flustered. Your Honor, this appears to be an orchestrated attempt to influence these proceedings. This job offer conveniently addresses every concern raised about Mr. Williams' circumstances. Robert Hartwell's expression hardened slightly. Ms. Blake, I take exception to the implication that this is anything other than a recognition of an exemplary employee's worth. Mr. Williams has earned this promotion through 3 years of dedicated service. The timing may be coincidental, but the merit is not. Judge Stevens studied the documents carefully. Mr. Hartwell, while this is certainly generous, I must question the timing. How do I know this offer is genuine and not simply an attempt to influence the court? Victoria Hartwell stood again. Your Honor, may I address that concern? The judge nodded, and Victoria's voice was clear and passionate. My father didn't know about this case until last night when I told him about my conversation with Mr. Williams. But once he learned about it, he immediately saw what I had seen, that sometimes the system fails to recognize true value. She looked around the courtroom, her voice growing stronger. We live in a world that often mistakes wealth for worth, that assumes bigger houses make better homes. But Mr. Williams taught me something important, that love creates possibilities. My father's offer isn't charity and it isn't manipulation. It's recognition of what Mr. Williams has always been, a man of character who deserves every opportunity to provide for his daughter. Victoria turned to face Linda Morrison directly. Ms. Morrison, you argue that you can give Emma material advantages, but can you give her 8 years of proof that you'll never abandon her again? Can you give her the security of knowing that the person who loves her has already proven that love through the hardest of times? The courtroom fell silent. Emma looked up at Marcus with confused but trusting eyes. Daddy, does this mean I get to stay with you? Before Marcus could answer, Judge Stevens called for another recess. I need time to review these new developments and consider how they affect my decision. As people filed out of the courtroom, Marcus found himself surrounded by the Hartwell team. Robert Hartwell extended his hand with a warm smile. Marcus, I want you to know that this offer stands regardless of the court's decision today. You've earned it. Marcus shook his hand, still in shock. Mr. Hartwell, I don't know what to say. I never expected anything like this. You don't need to say anything. Just keep being the kind of father and employee you've always been. Robert paused, his expression growing more serious. My daughter told me what you said about love not being measured in dollars. She was right. Those words changed something in her, and now they've changed something in me too. Victoria approached Emma, kneeling down to her level. Hi, Emma, I'm Victoria. I work with your daddy. Emma studied her solemnly. Are you the reason my daddy might get a better job? Victoria smiled. Your daddy earned that job all by himself. I just made sure the right people knew about it. Thank you, Emma said simply. Daddy works really hard. As they waited for court to resume, Marcus realized that whatever happened next, something fundamental had already changed. Win or lose, Emma had seen that there were people in the world who recognized the value of love and commitment over material wealth. She had witnessed her father stand up and fight for their family, and she had seen that sometimes when you do the right thing for the right reasons, the universe. When court resumed, the atmosphere had completely shifted. Judge Stevens looked at the new employment documents one more time, then set them aside and fixed her gaze on everyone in the courtroom. The weight of her decision hung heavy in the air. In all my years on the bench, Judge Stevens began, I have seen many custody cases, but few have presented such a clear contrast between different definitions of what constitutes a child's best interests. She looked directly at Emma, who sat quietly beside Marcus, her small hand still clasped in his. The court has heard testimony about financial resources, living conditions, and educational opportunities. These are important factors, and I do not dismiss them lightly. However, I have also heard something else today, testimony about love, commitment, and the kind of stability that cannot be measured in square footage or bank account balances. Linda Morrison leaned forward in her seat, her face tense with anticipation. Her lawyers had spent the recess arguing that the job offer was clearly a manipulation of the proceedings, and Catherine Blake looked ready to object at any moment. Judge Stevens continued, the sudden job offer from Mr. Hartwell's company does raise questions about timing. However, after reviewing Mr. Williams's employment records and speaking with court personnel about his character and behavior throughout these proceedings, I am satisfied that this recognition of his worth, while fortuitously timed, is genuine. Marcus felt his heart hammering against his ribs. Emma squeezed his hand and whispered, Daddy, I think the judge likes you. More importantly, Judge Stevens said, her voice growing stronger, I have observed Emma herself throughout these proceedings. This is a confident, articulate, well-adjusted child who clearly knows she is loved. She speaks about her father with genuine affection and trust. She demonstrates none of the anxiety or behavioral issues we typically see in children from unstable or neglectful homes. The judge turned her attention to Linda Morrison. Ms. Morrison, while I understand your desire to reconnect with your biological daughter, and while I acknowledge your genuine remorse for past decisions, I cannot ignore the fact that you chose to leave when parenthood became difficult. Parenthood is not a role one can step away from and return to at will, like a job or a hobby. Linda's face crumpled and she began to cry softly. Her husband put a comforting arm around her shoulders, but Marcus could see the disappointment and pain in both their faces. However, Judge Stevens continued, I also recognize that people can change and grow. Therefore, I am willing to establish a supervised visitation schedule that will allow you to build a relationship with Emma gradually, if that is what Emma wants. She looked back at Marcus. Mr. Williams, your testimony today was extraordinary. You demonstrated not only your love for Emma, but also your understanding of what it truly means to be a parent. The court finds that Emma's best interests are served by remaining in your primary custody. The words hit Marcus like a wave of relief so powerful he nearly fell from his chair. Emma jumped up with a squeal of joy, throwing her arms around his neck. We won, Daddy. We get to stay together. Marcus held her tight, tears streaming down his face. Around them, the courtroom erupted in quiet celebration. Mrs. Rodriguez, who had been sitting in the gallery, was dabbing her eyes with a tissue. David Chen was grinning and gathering his papers. Victoria Hartwell was smiling broadly, while her father nodded with satisfaction. But Judge Stevens wasn't finished. Mr. Williams, while I am awarding you continued custody, I want to make something clear. The court will be monitoring Emma's progress. I expect you to take advantage of the opportunities being offered to improve both your and Emma's circumstances. Emma's education and well-being remain the court's primary concern. Yes, Your Honor, Marcus managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you. Thank you so much. Judge Stevens looked at Emma one more time. Emma, do you understand what has happened here today? Emma nodded solemnly. I get to stay with my daddy because he loves me and takes good care of me. That's exactly right, the judge said, her stern expression softening into something almost like a smile. "And Emma, I want you to know that you have shown remarkable courage and wisdom today. Your father should be very proud of you." "I am," Marcus said immediately. "Every single day." As the court session officially ended and people began to file out, Linda Morrison approached their table. Marcus tensed, unsure what to expect, but her expression was sad rather than angry. "Mr. Williams," she said quietly, "I want you to know that I'm not going to appeal this decision." She looked at Emma, who was still beaming with happiness. "I can see how much she loves you, and how well you've taken care of her. I was wrong to think I could just walk back into her life and pick up where I left off." Marcus felt a wave of sympathy for this woman who had lost something precious through her own choices. "Ms. Morrison, if you'd like to get to know Emma gradually, as the judge suggested, I'm open to that. She should know her birth mother as long as it doesn't confuse or upset her." Linda's eyes filled with fresh tears. "That's very generous of you. I don't deserve that kindness." "It's not about what you deserve," Marcus said gently. "It's about what's best for Emma, and maybe someday she might benefit from having more people in her life who care about her." After Linda and her legal team left, Robert Hartwell approached with Victoria and their colleagues. "Marcus, I meant what I said about that promotion. When can you start your new position?" Marcus laughed, still feeling dazed by the day's events. "Whenever you need me, Mr. Hartwell, though I have to ask why. Why did you do all this for someone you barely know?" Robert exchanged a look with his daughter. "Victoria told me about your conversation that night in the office, about love creating possibilities, about showing up even when things are difficult. Those aren't just nice words, Marcus. That's a philosophy worth supporting." Victoria knelt down to Emma's level again. "Emma, I want you to know that your daddy is a very special person, not because of his new job, but because of who he is." Emma considered this seriously. "I know. He's the best daddy in the whole world." "I think you're absolutely right," Victoria said. As they gathered their things to leave the courthouse, Marcus felt overwhelmed by the surreal turn his life had taken. Just that morning, he had been a struggling night custodian facing the possibility of losing his daughter. Now he had a new career, financial security, and most importantly, his family intact. Emma skipped beside him as they walked down the courthouse steps into the afternoon sunshine. "Daddy, can we go get ice cream to celebrate?" "We can get anything you want, sweetheart," Marcus said, lifting her up and spinning her around. "We can get ice cream and pizza and maybe stop by the toy store, too." "I don't need toys," Emma said matter-of-factly. "I just need you." Marcus set her down and took her hand as they walked toward the bus stop. But before they could reach it, Victoria appeared beside them. "Actually, we have a company car here. Can we give you a ride home?" During the drive through the city, Emma chattered excitedly about the day's events, asking questions about Marcus's new job and whether they might be able to get a bigger apartment. Marcus answered her questions while privately marveling at how completely his world had changed. As they pulled up to their modest apartment building, Robert Hartwell turned around from the front seat. "Marcus, I want you to understand something. What happened today in that courtroom? That wasn't charity or a publicity stunt. You earned every bit of this through the kind of man you are and the kind of father you've been. Don't ever let anyone tell you different. Thank you, sir. I won't forget this. And Marcus, when you start your new position next week, I want you to remember what you told my daughter about honest work having dignity. That dignity comes from the person doing the work, not from the title or the paycheck. You're going to do great things." That evening, as Marcus tucked Emma into bed in their small apartment for what might be one of the last times, she looked up at him with serious eyes. "Daddy, are you happy?" Marcus smoothed her hair and smiled. "I'm the happiest man in the world, sweetheart." "Why do you ask?" "Because you're crying." Marcus touched his cheek and realized she was right. "Sometimes people cry when they're happy too, Emma. Today was the best day of my life." "Mine too," Emma said, snuggling into her pillow. "I love you, Daddy. I love you too, baby girl. Sweet dreams." As Marcus turned off the light and closed Emma's door, he reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight, all that mattered was that his daughter was safe, loved, and sleeping peacefully just down the hall. He had stood up for Emma in that courtroom, declaring, "I'll stand up for her," and meaning every word. But what he hadn't expected was that in standing up for her, he would discover that there were others willing to stand up for both of them. Sometimes, when you fight for what's right with everything you have, the universe conspires to help you win. Marcus settled into his own bed, exhausted but deeply grateful. Tomorrow would be the first day of their new life, and he couldn't wait to see what possibilities love would create next.